credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Podcast, a podcast centered around self-mastery. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, I'm joined by Khoa Tran. Khoa is a master of acquisition, positioning, leverage, and a well-tuned business mind. He has helped clients scale 6- and 7-figure businesses with his eyes set on 100 million plus. On top of his business acumen, he has a philosophical and spiritual perspective on life and shares my focus on the value of our time here with the Memento Mori penned on his arm as well. I'm excited for our conversation today. Khoa, welcome to the show, brother.
Appreciate it.
It's a very full circle moment for my personal story, and how we were initially connected was through a shared kind of masterminding course that we bought into over a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. And it's very, very interesting that, amongst the inception of this podcast and myself joining the kind of public sphere and putting content out, that you were one of those characters. And, we had brief interactions in the Discord at that time, but didn't get to know each other too well. But I knew that you were here in Bali. And then in a very, very short year, I find myself kind of feeling like I need to go and end up taking the trip. And it was actually a mutual friend through that same community, Leo, who reached out. He's like, hey, I see you're on the ground in Bali. Like, you have to meet Khoa. And so I sent you a DM, or he connected us, and then the other day we had quite an interesting conversation. It covered kind of a good breadth, and I was really impressed by how kind of switched on you were. Maybe it was a few coffees deep that day, and so you're really, really directed. We connected on a lot of different things, amongst astrology to life to business, and I'm excited to bring that conversation to light today.
For sure, let's do it.
Yeah, so typically how I like to open things up is just to give the audience context as well as myself. I like to hear how you found yourself entering the world of what I call here self-mastery, but it could be self-actualization, self-development in general. I find that sometimes there are people that come into our lives, books, moments. Sometimes it requires kind of a dark moment that is the inflection point that realizes that maybe there's more going on here, maybe I'm meant for more. So walk me through that. It is open-ended, but how you answer it will kind of give me branches and inform me on where to go from there.
Cool, beautiful. So the question was, how did I enter the self-mastery sphere?
Yeah, I would say just kind of recognizing that you were maybe meant for more, an atypical path, stepping away from a life of relative unconsciousness and programming and whatever else that many people find themselves in that lane, kind of being passively carried, and then more so stepping into the driver's seat of your life.
For me, it's interesting. It's not really inspiration. It was desperation. It was just my first breakup. That's it. Period. End of story. There's nothing else to it, right? At the time, I was 17 to 20. I was dating this girl for 3 years. First relationship, she broke up with me, and I was like, all right, got to figure this out. Right. It wasn't that emotionally neutral at the time. Right. So we broke up, et cetera, went through a period of social anxiety, depression, mild depression, panic attacks. And then I was like, oh, cool, I got to solve this. So there were two paths that I saw. I either get jacked and then it solved, the symptom, blah, 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 which is what most guys do. Or I go for the root cause, right? And to me, the root cause was my communication skills at the time, because I couldn't, I had social anxiety. I was like, how do I fix this, right? And I'm very, extreme personality. I either go full on, I'm either all in or I'm all out, right? So with that, I was like, cool, what is the biggest thing that will solve this? What is the biggest fear that people have around this? Public speaking. Right? People fear public speaking more than they fear death. So I'm like, all right, let's do that. So I took public speaking workshops, did that, learned it, spoke on stages a couple of years later, spoke on stages at 120 plus business owners, did improv, vocal exercises, did pseudo Toastmasters. So basically what that is we had challenges every week, right? And if you didn't do the challenge, you got cut. So I'm like, all right, beautiful, let's do it. So that was my basically initiation, and it was out of desperation, right? It was just out of desperation. And then over time, I learnt, identity. I learnt how do you mold your identity, how do you turn to someone else, how do you use that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just snowballed.
That's interesting. How did you come to the awareness of the root cause? Because I feel like, especially for a young person, when you're in the trenches, the proverbial trenches of the emotional kind of tumult, it can be generally overwhelming. And like you said, the symptom is so ever present. It's like right in front of you that it might be hard to point at the root cause. Was it just a ton of self-reflection? Were you in a period of time where you spent a lot of time alone? How did you get clarity on that?
Good question. So for me, how did I get clarity on the... Okay. What I find is that most guys, if they are struggling with, at the time it was just like, it's a confidence slash self-esteem slash social anxiety issue, right? Like that is quote unquote the issue here.
Yeah.
Because it was so bad that I couldn't even talk to cashiers. I was like, this is a huge problem. It was so bad that I would... So I was 20 at the time. I just started clubbing, right? I just started going out. And then my friends were like, hey, go hit on this girl or that girl, whatever. Right? I was a completely different person back then. I was more naive, hadn't had life experience yet. And then just couldn't do it. Panic attack. Boom, 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 boom. I literally had to leave the club. I remember one time I had to leave. I went across the road, right? Went to an abandoned building, went upstairs on the second level, and then sat my ass down like right next to a wall. Just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Friend called me 15 minutes later. He was like, yo, where'd you go? Blah, 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 blah. That's how bad it was. And I find, and for me, it's just a direct path. Like, it's just cool. Point A to point B. What solves that? Like, why are we doing this indirect bullshit? Right? Most guys try to solve their confidence issue or self-esteem issue or identity problems with, like, if it's this kind of problem where it's a social anxiety problem, they try.
Right.
What are you doing? It's not going to work. Because you're getting, like option A, you're getting bigger, you're getting X, blah, 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 blah. You might get a little bit of gratification, but that doesn't fix what's internal.
Yeah, it is really symptom management at that point. What's funny is I find so that was actually kind of my initial foray into the world of self-mastery. Was like I was tremendously insecure about my body when I was young. Like I played team sports and I was a decent athlete, but like would never want to take my shirt off around the other kids. And so it started with like how to get abs on YouTube and stuff like that. And then it opens up this big wide world because you see the layers, right? Like you get to a certain place with your body, but that's clearly not the end point. And it is just a symptom. And I find that the gym is one, but now that I'm entering the entrepreneurship space, online money, and I start to meet more and more people at higher and higher levels, that's another one that I find men continually get trapped into, that thinking scaling a business is also going to be something that they can hang their hat on, but it's really just putting monthly recurring revenue in a me-sized hole. You have to go inward and actually address that like sense of unworthiness or lack or fear, whatever that may be. So it's impressive, certainly, that at such a young age you were at least able to identify that central kind of point, even amongst the symptoms being severe. You know, everybody has their first heartbreak, and you're in it when you're in it. Like looking back, you're just like, you didn't even know the word love, even though you said it. But in that time, it was as real as it could be. So that's very, very interesting. It's almost like the opposite of everybody else's first heartbreak story, like you said. Like everybody just like, I'm going to go to the gym and like get jacked and build this hard shell so no one can hurt me again.
Can I add on to what you say? I think now looking back, it's not I'm going to build this hard shell like physically, but it was in terms of I'm going to build this hard shell in terms of character.
Yeah.
Right. Whereby if I build this character, I cannot be touched. Like if I build, but not like a video game character, if I build the character, my character. And what I mean by I can't be touched is, how do I become so strong, so powerful, so XYZ, where like nothing phases me? Like, and that was just step one.
Yeah, I like a word I was discussing last night at dinner with a friend, the 4 agreements, and the first of the 4 agreements is be impeccable with your word.
Yep.
And he chooses impeccable specifically and elaborates on it. And like impeccable is without sin, and it is without the fallibility. Not only in this context, obviously he's talking about your word, so your word to others, but specifically your words to yourself. But it's becoming impeccable of character. When internally you know that you are kind of undeniable, you have your frameworks, you have your moral structure, you have everything, then when people throw stones, whether it be a heartbreak or a business deal falls through or somebody kind of slanders your character, whatever it may be, you're so rooted in self that it does create that kind of unshakableness.
Yep.
So from, I guess, that entry point, you're acquiring skills in communication at a relatively young age. Were you also entering into the arena of business in parallel? And walk me through a little bit about that specific passion of yours and when that kind of came to be.
Yes and no. I say yes because yes, I was trying shit at the time, but like all the normal shit, right? Dropshipping, affiliate marketing, whatever. And no, as in I wasn't taking it seriously. That wasn't my purpose at the time. And the reason why I say purpose is, like you probably read the book with the Superior Way of Man, right? There's a concept that I kind of paraphrased for myself since I was like 20. I paraphrased it. I just kind of took it and then I changed a couple of things. Like, oh, cool, I'm gonna use this. And the concept was, for me, I see life and I see purpose as like an onion, right? And then all it is you don't have one absolute. No, you just keep pulling. Like you just keep, like you have a layer outside, and that is your purpose at the time until it gets either obsolete or boring, right? Until there's no more use, which is boring now. And that's when you know to peel to the next layer. And now that's your purpose. So my purpose at that moment in time was was actually my social life, right? Like after I got my confidence back, it took about 6 months to a year. All right, after I fixed all of that, what ended up happening was I just started partying a lot. Right, start partying, going out, etc., and then I would use what I learned for going out purposes.
Do you think that period of, we'll call it conquest, was a self-soothing behavior in reflection? Like, now that I am capable, and I think at some point we all reach the place where it's like, I know how to dress, like decently good looking, I can definitely talk the talk, and it becomes like a lot easier for kind of what we're loosely alluding to. Do you think that sort of period of your life was trying to pick something else to fill that you-sized hole?
Yes and no. So yes, in terms of I was trying to do that, but no, I actually didn't even do that. Like I didn't even do that as much as I could have. I had my foot on the brake. And the reason why I had my foot on the brake was it didn't feel aligned at the time. It just didn't, right? Like the people that I was around just weren't high quality. They weren't talking about what I wanted to be talking about. Couldn't go deep. It was just shallow. So I had my foot in the, like my soul just, we're not going any further than this, you know? So, yeah.
How did you go about shifting what your external environment in the form of the people around you looked like?
Moved out of my hometown. Just left.
The eject button.
Yeah. Bye. I bought. Yeah.
Nice. And where did that take you from and then to?
From where, sorry? To where?
Yeah.
Oh, so I was so my hometown is Adelaide, South Australia, right? It's about 1.6 or something million people. It's small compared to like Australian cities. And then I moved to the Gold Coast. So the Gold Coast is basically like LA, Miami vibes of Australia.
Okay.
Right. So, and then the community that I was in, The reason why I moved was because of the community, right? I was like, whoa, I've never seen this before. Everyone was everyone was wealthy, but also like spiritual, right? So we would do fun shit like, rent cars, rent Ferraris, rent Lambos, Porsches, Mustangs, whatever, G-Wagons, and then just drive them, blah, 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 blah. And then we would all go to like a breathwork session or something, or like a client's event where they're talking about breathwork and spirituality and consciousness. Yeah.
When did that become a part of your life? Like the interest in spirituality was, because I guess winding back the clock, it's like you get to the place where confidence is back, you're leveraging that tool, but also have that kind of deep gnosis that like some amount of this is malaligned, like whether it's the people, the behavior, some combination of the two. Did you always have a personal spiritual practice and then you just wanted to find other people that did, or?
Spirituality always resonated with me on some manner, but I never found people that were practicing it in like Adelaide or whatever that resonate with me. And the way that it resonates with me is, yes, spiritual, but also do you do business? Like, can we use this? Is it practical?
Practical.
All right. Is it pragmatic? Cool, we can be spiritual all day and fucking,
Sit in
transcend
tall
to the
grass.
5D or whatever. Yeah, sit in tall grass and do nothing, and just for where I'm at in my life, doesn't really interest me. But probably when I'm 60, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, and circling back to the your delineation from David Data on purpose, I really do like imagining life at large in seasons, even for different verticals, whether it's your spirituality, whether it's your physical health, whether it's your relationships that you're seeking out, businesses. Like a delineation I make in my program when I go over purpose with the guys that I work with is that there's inner and outer purpose. And so outer purpose is what you're describing. It's the seasons. It's at one point you're a child, and then maybe you're a soccer player and a high school student, and then a university student, and then you get your first job, and then you're a father and a grandfather. And those shift and change as life evolves. But the inner purpose is the core of that onion, as you're kind of describing. It's who you are being the entire time, being changed into, evolving through. It's like it's the I am behind the whatever you may be changing in your personal life. And I like that framework, yours as well as kind of very similarly mine, because it gives you permission to not try to, because I get DMs all the time, like, how do you find your purpose? And it's like a buzzword. There's like all sorts of different exercises. And I include a lot of those in the program that I run. And I've done podcasts on like Ikigai and some of these other really helpful frameworks. But the truth is you're never arriving at, okay, this is it. Like, I'm just going to ride this thing the whole rest of my life. And like, I'm in this box and it feels really good. You can have higher level missions, I suppose, that feel very aligned. And like you set these like very high in the sky goals to like change the world or affect some sort of positive change in a people group. But what that looks like continues to evolve. And when you take the spiritual route and detach yourself from how or what it's going to look like, which I think is hard for people like you and I, and we can go into the Aries, more like wanting control, very pointed energy. But when you let go of, like, detach from the outcome and focus entirely on those inputs, life gets really, really fun because you're just excited to see what those new doors look like. What is the next layer of the onion? Like, I control the peeling, but I don't control what's underneath.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess with spirituality, I'm curious that I saw on your Instagram you have Rooted in God's Plan. So I want to go into a little bit of what is your current spiritual framework, belief system? Is it an amalgamation? Would you call yourself Christian or some other larger religious bucket? I'm curious.
Really, really, really good question. So for me, right now, currently, it's a combination, right? So you can consider me Christian and spiritual. That's how I would, quote unquote, label myself, right? Specifically, the reason why is I started believing in God when I was like rock bottom. I just came out of another relationship. The business that I was trying to build at the time just wasn't working. Couldn't fucking figure it out. I'm like, all right. And then on top of that, went broke. So I was like, bang, bang, bang. Just everything on top of everything. I couldn't take it. I was like, too much, too much, too much, too much. And I just drew the line in the sand. I was like, fuck this. God, if you exist, anyone, if you exist, help me out here. I am screwed, right? So that's when I essentially turned to God. I was like, can't do this anymore. And ever since, I've been going to church every Sunday. All right, I would talk to God, pray songs, all of those things. And for me, it's literally just a function of, does this make me a better person, or does this get me to who I see myself becoming? If it gets me closer to that, cool. I don't care whether it's Christianity, Islam, Hindu, Buddhism. I don't give a shit. My point is, does it get me closer to that being? If it does, I'll do it. If it doesn't, nope.
So that being said, why have you selected the Christian faith as your framework currently?
Good question. So for me, I'm a very like pattern orientated person. So I just take hints, right? If there's something going on in my life, it just keeps happening. I'm like, all right, let's take the hint. And the hint that I had to take was everyone that I chose to surround myself with, like all of my inner circle, most of them were Christian. When at the time I was like labeling myself as spiritual. Like, why am I like literally my best of the best friends? Like the closest of the closest inner circle. I have about 8 to 10 people, but like the top 4 or whatever, top 5, they're all spiritual. I mean, they're all Christians. There's something here, you know? And then at my deepest depth, when all of that was happening, my friend was like, hey, come to church. Like, let's go. It wasn't even a fact of let's go. Let's say I'm desperate for something, you know. And then when I went to church, released everything, I just broke down, cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. And my friends were around me. They were hugging me, praying for me, and it just felt good. So I was like, let's continue.
Yeah, I think that feeling and that like internal knowing cannot be understated or cannot be overstated. Because I was having a very similar conversation last night at dinner, and I'm probably going to reference that conversation a number of times because we were talking about God and going through different belief sets and ultimately seeking truth with a capital T, but with detachment to the words you use in the schools of thought, because we're just looking for truth. But that knowing, I heard an analogy recently that I thought was helpful, and it is that you can have 2 people that know Michael Jordan, as the example. This one guy has watched every game he ever played, knows the shoes he wore, every stat, every TV airing, everything, right? Like, this guy is the biggest super fan you could ever know. He could give you every X, Y, and Z. And then there's Michael Jordan's mom, who knows Michael Jordan. And for myself personally, I was raised in the Christian faith, went to Christian school for a long time. So my identification with the faith at that time was purely intellectual. It was just simply, I loved apologetics, which is like defense of the faith, because it felt like a debate and I could prove people right or wrong. So it was like, okay, if I meet somebody who is Islamic, I send them to this verse. And I meet an atheist, I send them to this verse. And it was very X's and O's and tactical. And when I look back and kind of laugh now because it is so antithetical to the life of Christ himself. Like, I can't imagine Jesus berating somebody in a debate, right? Like, he just hugged people and showed love and like was sitting in the tall grass sharing ideas like for the disaffected, for the prostitutes, for the lepers, etc. And so he was emblematic of love, and my identification was not there. But now I'm in a place where I feel like I know God, as in I've felt it. And the other day, like since we have talked, I had my first facilitated breathwork experience. I'd done like Wim Hof and guided stuff online, but this was intense. It was like a 2-hour experience, and I want to do a full solo podcast, but I will spoil some of what will be in that. for the sake of this conversation because I think it's super relevant. So at the beginning, they're kind of guiding us through some body energetic stuff. After that finishes, we do a guided meditation to set the intention. And because I had never done anything, all of my intention was just like hold openness, keep the heart space open, because as you and I may share, it's like we want to grab life and control it. Like everything's curated, everything's by design, everything's intentional. But I knew that this was going to take me places that maybe I wasn't comfortable with, and I just wanted to hold that space. And they said, say a prayer to whatever you identify with, whether it's God, Christ, whatever words work for you. And because I'm not currently in a place where I'm identifying with the Christian faith, I chose not to use Jesus, but I've always loved the word God, and that's kind of how I connect. So I ended up praying to God for that intention. Amazing breathwork experience, and the only visuals that came through, very interestingly enough, was a lot of these like geometric X's kind of splaying off of, at the very center, an undisturbed cross. And that shit was absolutely surreal. Now, I can't divorce the fact that that was part of my upbringing, so maybe some part of my subconscious is sending me that way, but the amount of connectedness I felt to God in that experience, and there's plenty of like personal layers that are not particularly relevant for this conversation, but the fact that I sent that prayer and intention to God and then I was given that cross was a really, really special moment.
Beautiful.
How long had you been experiencing things like breath work as a way to access the infinite and God?
Since I was 24, since I moved to the Gold Coast.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And have you since then pursued exogenous means as well, like whether it's psychedelics of any kind or like DMT or anything?
Yep. I've done psychedelics a handful of times. All right. I've done it in a more ceremonial manner 3 times. But if you're talking, I'm crossing out the psychedelics for like party purposes.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes.
So those are different. But in terms of the ceremonial manner, yeah, I've done it 3 times, and it's changed my personality permanently every time.
Was it immediate? Like the trip comes down
Immediate.
and you feel completely different?
Immediate. Yeah.
Was each time the same?
No.
What were the most notable changes that you think stood out?
So the first time that I did this, I had a calling to take psychedelics at one point. This was roughly about August last year.
Okay.
Probably like this time last year, right? Like 12 months ago. I took it. One of my female friends, she came in, she like Palo Santo'd the room, cleaned up the energy, etc., etc. And then it was just my own personal bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was within the trip, and within the whole trip, such a powerful trip, like 6 hours. First time I've ever done it in a ceremonial manner. Had my eyes closed the whole time, and I was sitting cross-legged, like on my bed, and the back head or headboard is like at the back of me. And then what ended up happening was my hands were like this on my legs. And then the words that were going on was, I accept, I accept, I accept, I accept. And the reason why those words were going on was, it was basically my conscious or subconscious, whatever you want to call it. It was going, I will accept the roles that you want me to have. Because before this period of my life, I was still living very hedonistically. Right, I would be going to, parties. Came out to Bali and then just immediately socialized. I was like, all right, let's go out. So we'd go to like villa parties, go to like billionaires' mansion parties, go to, just XYZ. And then I saw the like highest echelon of this lifestyle was that billionaire's mansion party. It was his 30th birthday. His girlfriend is like, I think Colombian or something, whatever it was. I didn't see a single source of soul within him. The whole time he was wearing a robe during his whole party. I didn't see him with shoes on the whole time. I saw him with a cigarette in his hands the whole time. Right? And like no one gave a fuck about him. Just no one gave a fuck. So I was like, this isn't it. And this was like the highest echelon. Like, I'm talking, I think there were like 3 dance floors, fire dancers. I'm fairly sure there were snakes and tigers and shit. Bro, you've made it.
Right.
What else is there? All right.
Right.
Girlfriend, super attractive. No soul.
Hmm.
I was like, this isn't it. This isn't it. Funny enough, I was on mushrooms that night. Wasn't a good trip though. I was super paranoid.
Hmm.
So, back to the trip. Just the roles were going, I accept. And it was me surrendering. It was basically me surrendering to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was saying universe, right? I was like, I will surrender. Whatever you want me to play out. You want me to be a husband? I accept. You want me to be a brother? I accept. Entrepreneur? I accept. Leader? I accept. Mentor? I accept. Student? I accept. Everything. Son, right? Godfather. Whatever you want me to play, I will accept. And then what ended up happening was literally overnight, I became someone who avoided responsibility and was very hedonistic to like, hey, I will take on all responsibility.
Mm.
And I just fully stepped into that. So it just changed my consciousness overnight. So that's one. The second trip that I took, I thought it would be very similar, but I ended up going back to my child self. And I was just very playful. And what ended up happening was the second trip was roughly about 6 months later. And I had been like feeling so tense because after the first trip, I took on everything, blah, 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 blah. And then life just felt so tense, right? I felt like I had everything on my shoulders. So then the second trip went, I think, well, what Guy or God was telling me to do was, hey, go back to your child self. Ironically, after you've now grown up, go back to your child self. All right. But yeah, that was the second one, and then the third one. Third one was purging my own birth. That one was interesting.
Yeah.
I ended up purging my own birth. I felt guilty about being born because my parents had a miscarriage before me. So I am born as the first son, the first child, and the first grandson on my mother's side. So the role that I took on in life was the protector. Like, I would take care of everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, I didn't know this until I took this trip where I purged my own birth. And what I mean by purge is I let go and move through the grief of my own birth. I didn't know that my inner child had guilt and shame about being born. Because my parents had a miscarriage before me, so my inner child felt like I fucking stole someone's role. Like I'm not meant to be
It
here.
wasn't meant for you.
Yeah, it wasn't meant for me. So yeah, that was the third one.
It's amazing. Yeah, all extremely unique, but I think the through line that I hear from those three is acceptance. Acceptance of roles, responsibility, acceptance of self and innocence almost, and then acceptance that it's okay that you are here and it happened on purpose and it's all part of the plan. I would describe and will describe the experience I had with breathwork, like the feeling that the word to describe the feeling immediately when I came out of it was home, and synonymously like love, but I think home brings an important aspect of familiarity, as if you've already been there.
Yep.
And you know, both you and I have tattooed Memento Mori, and so there's the connection there of a constant remembrance and meditation on death, and not in a morose or morbid way, but in a empowering way, as well as a decision-making razor, that like my time is not infinite, nor is it even guaranteed. You know, we're both young, healthy men. Statistically, we should go for a decent amount more, but there's not a lot stopping the fact that one of our stories could be cut short on our scooter ride home after this. Knowing all of that, it informs like how and why I carry myself, and also allows me to go to bed every night upon that meditation and say, if this was my last, am I happy with how it went? Life up until that point, but also just that day. And since stepping into the arena, as I say, my answer has always been and continues to be yes. What makes that answer yes, if it is yes for you? And how does Memento Mori impact your day-to-day life? Why did you choose to bring it with you until you leave that particular meat suit?
All right, let's answer the last question first. So, why? I actually love tattoos. I love tattoos. I'm gonna make my whole body a yin yang. Right, like yeah, we spoke about this. So I want my whole upper left arm, left side tatted, and then right leg tatted. But I'm still very, very like picky. All right. So when I was looking at my first tattoo, nothing resonated for me. Or in terms of I would keep. Then I saw this, Memento Mori. It's two things, right? Like remember that you're gonna die, and remember that you're gonna die is just. For me, it's more so like fuck it. Like if there's any obstacle or any fear around doing something, my backup plan, my backup plan is, fuck, I'm gonna die. Let's just go. Figure it out. Right. So let's say if I fear around, let's say at the time I'd fear around like public speaking, or if I fear around like building a huge business or making an investment, or making, like let's say dropping 10 mil or a mil into an investment play or something. Fuck it. Responsibly.
Sure.
So that's meaning number one for me, but actually meaning number two, I don't know if you've heard meaning number two. So Memento Mori, don't quote me, I might be wrong. But Memento Mori, as I remember, is there was two meanings. There was remember that you're going to die, and there's a story goes that the soldiers would talk to the generals before they would go to war and say, hey, Memento Mori, because the Roman Empire was on such an uprise, right? That they had to be checked in their ego. So the second meaning is remember that you're mortal. And that one still plays out in my retrospect. And the reason why was when I was younger, I had a superiority complex. It probably was even closer to a God complex. Meaning it was that great.
Right.
Like it was that much ego. So that keeps me in check as well. It's like, hey, remember that you're mortal. Like you're just a human.
I like that a lot, and that story does stick out to me. It's one that actually kind of captured me and pushed me to include it in my art on my arm as well, because I too have large aspirations, think relatively highly of myself, and think that my ceiling is as high as I believe it to be. So I feel very self-empowered, but I also know that pride cometh before the fall, and riding that line between ego and self-assured confidence, it's close. It's almost maybe arguably two sides of the same coin. So it's something that's super important, and very serendipitously, like the remainder of my upper outer sleeve is actually going to be Icarus. So similar story, fly too close to the sun and you get burned, but you can still fly. You just have to keep yourself in check and know where to go and when to go there. So I like that a lot about how you have incorporated it into your personal practice.
Can I add on to what you're saying real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you know how you said riding the line of, it's basically riding the line of like confidence but not being too overly confident, right? So for me, how I see that is accuracy in my words, accuracy in my character, accuracy in my actions, accuracy in my movements, in what I wear, what I dress, how I represent myself, who I have around me, right? And the reason why accuracy, and also accuracy on your strengths and weaknesses, right? And the reason why accuracy is, if I am accurate, one, I am in truth, I am being truthful, I'm being integrous, but I also know where I stand and how I can actually move forward.
Clarity.
Yeah. So the second meaning probably even has more importance for me, because I'm the type of person that leans too towards overly confident. Like, you can throw me off, like, you can... I'm seriously the type of person where I just jump before I don't even know I'm jumping. Like, people are like, how do you do entrepreneurship, and like, how aren't you scared of doing 9 to 5? I'm like, bro, I don't even... 9 to 5 wasn't even an option. I didn't even know I was jumping. Right? If I knew, I might not have jumped. But I have no fucking clue. You know?
I like that a lot. I actually saw a quote yesterday. I don't know if you know Zach Pograb. He's like the obsession guy. He has his own... I don't think he has a podcast yet, but he has a newsletter. And in it, a quote that he included was, "Jump and the net will appear."
Yeah.
But it's only when you jump. And I really like that because it brings to mind a Steve Jobs quote, somebody who I have a tremendous amount of admiration for. A lot of his quotes and works are kind of like singed in my young subconscious to dream big, to think that you can put a dent in the universe and all these things. But he has, in the Stanford Commencement, one of the many amazing audio bites from that is he's talking about taking acts of faith in your life. And he says that we can only ever connect the dots looking
backwards.
back.
Yeah.
So you have to believe in something, call it God, call it intuition, call it faith, whatever. But you have to believe that it will work out, because there is no way to forecast. And I think that's also another thing that, as goal-oriented people, high achiever types, people with visions and plans for the future, it can be very, very hard to not want to be extremely attached to the outputs and the outcomes. How do you, especially as a business owner and an entrepreneur, ride that line of detachment from the outcome, but also aiming and not just being directionally ambiguous, right? Like, you're not just putting inputs into the universe. I know data is one big thing for you, but how do you kind of balance that?
Gotcha. Can you rephrase the question and simplify it down into a very short sentence?
How do you, in your own personal practice as an entrepreneur, balance setting clear and definite goals and outcomes, but being personally or emotionally detached from having to have those outcomes?
Good question. So for me, I actually learned this from Tom Bilyeu, the founder of Quest. He built it to like $1 billion, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, what I do is I don't wrap my self-esteem around business, money, women, achievements. I just don't. Right? I learned not to. And specifically, the reason why is, I know if I do that, I am fucked. Because you just make terrible decisions. Because everything is just ebb and flow, right? There's seasons. Just like there's seasons in your life where there's goes down, goes up, blah, 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 blah. Cool. Your career is going to do the same thing, right? Relationships are going to do the same thing. So women. Achievements are going to do the same thing. If you wrap and tie your self-esteem around any of these, you're fucked. So my thought process was, what can I tie my self-esteem around that's under my control and that is consistent? And for me, what it was learning. I can tie my self-esteem around that. How can I be the best learner? I will be the dumbest person in a room, no problems. No problems. Right? But not because of that stupid quote where fucking put yourself in a room and if you know that quote, right? People say that quote and they can't even do it. It's because their self-esteem is still tied to the intellect or whatever. But if I wrap my self-esteem around being a learner, you are forever adaptable and forever in the best position possible. Right? It was Darwin. It was Darwin that said that it's not the strongest or the fastest or the XYZ that survives. It's the most adaptable. Cool. How do I use that within life, within myself? right? And the only thing that I can control is my behavior, and also to your point, like how do you stay, you know, directional but also detached? Like how do you actually use that point? And I just took in Darwin's concepts, and I took in what I learned from Tom Bilyeu, and I took in what I learned. And essentially what it is literally what I just said. If I wrap my self-esteem around learning, I am the most adaptable, because like learning itself is adaptability. If I failed, cool, did I learn?
Right.
If I learned, I still won. You know? If I'm making an experiment or if I'm wrong, did I learn? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that because you're basically making yourself recession proof, business model proof. It takes away a lot of I think the worries that can deter people from really entering whatever arena they're curious in entering, whether it's e-com, starting a podcast, putting your first Instagram post up. The worry is that it's not going to work out. But it's who you are becoming in that process. And if you can continue to just add skills to the skill toolbox, like you're just a more and more dangerous person, so that now, like Khoa now, if he was dropped with zero personal capital in a new city he hasn't been to, with no following, background, pre-existing network, you have the skills and assets to start closing that gap super rapidly, right? Like, you know what that strategy would look like. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to find best co-working space. I'm going to start shooting the shit. I have no money, so I'm just going to sit there until somebody buys me a coffee and I can chat shit. And then you're in the game. Hey, this is my position. Boom, boom, boom. Like, what are you working on? I'm willing to work for free for this thing. I have all these skill sets that pre-exist it. Pretty quickly, you're salaried, right? Like, you close that gap simply because of who you are, as opposed to what you brought in the suitcase, like, literally, like what your Amex or fucking Chase account says. So I really, really like that, because it gives you permission to always focus on the internal world as opposed to whatever life allows to be attracted to you in the periphery, which, as you alluded to, is very sinusoidal, like on, off, on, off.
Agreed, yeah. Can I add on to what you're saying as well?
Absolutely.
Right. When people are like, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? I think people have it backwards. Not in terms of the cliche or what if it does. No, shut the fuck up. People literally have it backwards, because you have one life. And I don't understand. Not doing the thing is fulfilling your what if it doesn't work. That's one. And two, I also don't understand, because you have unlimited fucking darts. And what that means is, right, let's just imagine a dartboard. That is your goal, right? And then your darts is your attempts. I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to try that. Literally, you have unlimited until you die. Pew, 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 pew. Only one of them has to work. That is it. You get one right, you're sweet, you're golden. And then you'll figure it out from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was from Hermosi originally where I heard it, but it's kind of talking about the growth curve of whatever you're trying to build. Almost all, like 99+% of attempted businesses, attempted people chasing their dreams, etc., fail only because they predetermined that, all right, it was after throwing 150,000 darts. I'm chalking it up. The dartboard can't be hit. But what you didn't know is that it was 150,001 that was going to be your dart. It's just in the acceptance of failure and exiting the game, essentially. Like, you're pre-signing up for death and death of that dream, that you guarantee failure. Like, failure, it's 100% success rate leaving the game.
Yeah.
That is 100% guaranteed way to fail. You might not get the goal if you stay in it, but you're a hell of a lot more likely than 100% failure rate by just walking away.
I would actually slightly disagree on you might not get the goal. Because all you have to fucking do, literally all you have to do, is throw your dart, learn. So that's why tie your self-esteem around learning. Learn. I got to throw a degree left. Go get another degree left. Go get. You do that and then project that over a 10, 20-year period, I guarantee you will get your goal. Probably much less. But there's no way you can't if you just project it out, future pace. Right? If you keep trying to build a fucking $10 million business or $1 million business for people who think smaller, and then you give yourself 20 years, and then you tie on the fact that your self-esteem is around learning or not looking good or not whatever, because the only thing you can control is behavior. So if you tie yourself around self-esteem is around learning, then your behavior is now learning instead of trying to look fucking smart and make the same stupid decisions. Impossible for you not to get. Literally impossible. The only thing that's stopping people is themselves and their ego. Themselves and their ego affects their behavior. That's it.
How do you assess when in process whether or not you're learning and directionally improving?
Math. All right. I learned this from a good friend of mine. His name's George. And I'm going to talk about acquisition now just because it's the thing I know. All right. I've been doing sales for like 10 years. So door-to-door sales, DM closing, appointment setting, Zoom sales, fucking, what else? Like negotiation, blah, blah, blah. Like almost every single sales you can kind of think of, except for stage. Right? That I haven't done. Now, when it comes to acquisition, right, which is sales, all it is just two things: psychology and math. The psychology part is gets the sell. The math helps it scale. What do I mean by math? Right? All it is, you get your funnel, right? Lead gen, lead nurture, lead conversion, delivery, and then ascension. X. Let's say it's a phone closing funnel, right? Leads come in, right? You do a call to action. Leads come in, cool. How many appointments booked did you get? Cool. How many appointments showed? Cool. That's another X. So each one of these is an X, right? How many appointments showed? Cool. How much cash was collected? Cool. How much revenue? Cool. What's the cash collected percentage? Cool. Find out all of those X's. Do a data collection over 2 weeks. Find out all of those X's, right? Where's the bottleneck? Where's the one that if I increase it, right? So for example, I was with I had a coffee with Hamza yesterday. All right, so Hamza Ahmed, huge YouTube channel, 2.2 million, something, whatever. I was doing a dissection of his business. Right, I was like, cool, here's your math, bang, 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 right? And then one of the percentages was like lower, like every single business you're gonna have a bottleneck. So he had a bottleneck. I literally just went, if you 4x this, 4x isn't even that much. It was like moving this from, I'm not going to give the actual percentages because it's private. Moving this from like couple percentage to a couple more percentage, like 4 times. You 4x your whole business. And how you do that is just by implementing this sales process instead of doing the one you're currently doing. That's it. So back to your question, how do you make decisions that you know you're in directionally correct? Math. If you can turn it into math, turn it into fucking math.
How do you think that applies for personal goals? How much of your life is quantified?
How much? Well, the real answer is not enough. Meaning if I can turn it more into math, or I should be turning everything into math. Right. But how much of my life is quantified? Quite a bit of it. I even quantify my dating life. Whereby, like, for me, so I'm a very, like, I covered this at the beginning, I'm a very extreme person, right? I'm either full this way or I'm full this way. So there's been periods of my life where I would literally be consciously celibate, like full work mode, no sex, no dates, no whatever, for like months, right? And then other periods where I would take 4 women or et cetera, 4 different women on a date in like a week. Bang, 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 let's go. What I realize is that either way burns me out because I'm naturally extroverted. So this way burns me out. And then this way is just too much energy expenditure. It's just too much.
Right.
Right. So I'm in a season of balance, right? So for me right now, I'm doing, cool. Let's do a day every like 2 weeks, something like that. All right.
How do you, or do you, leave room for, and I think we briefly discussed this in our first discussion, with the optimization and quantification, also leave room for serendipity and flow?
I'm still working through this in terms of like how do you integrate both? Because I haven't found a lot of people besides Michael Singer. He's the only one that I've found, like a spiritual teacher who flows through their life and then became ultra successful. He built a $1 billion company just by flowing. Right? He just dealt with what's right in front of him and that's it. But you're essentially leaving it to God's plan, which is great. The only thing is I don't know if I could accept not becoming the person that I can become, like ultra successful in every area, ultra competent in every area. I don't know if I could accept that. And I understand that. But then I understand that that goes against my thing of being rooted in God's plan.
That's good.
I understand that as well. Right, so I'm currently letting those ideas marinate.
Yeah. It's awesome because I think a lot of in our physical reality, truth is trapped in paradox. And I talked about this yesterday on a podcast with Jacob, but there's the quote, like, intelligence, or a sign of intelligence is being able to hold two competing ideas in your head at the same time. And we talked about how, or I had posited that potentially even more than intelligence, there's a humility to it too, because you're not like choosing one and then saying like, I am right because this X, Y, and Z, and then I'm just going to bash down the other competing idea, but you're actually just kind of playing with both, that maybe there is truth in both. And I like the analogy, as I stated earlier in this episode, like it's a coin and there's two sides. So to somebody who's looking at one, it's like, yeah, that's a face, like that's a head. And the other person's like, no, that's tails. Like 100%. We're looking, like, are you looking at the same coin? And they are looking at the same coin. So it's not that it is entirely a different entity or a way of life, but balancing or finding that paradoxical truth for yourself is kind of what life is about, which I think is fun, especially when you have the mental horsepower to kind of like wrestle and balance, and then also with data, experiment. Like, let's A/B test these two different life paths. Like, okay, dating all the time, it's not getting me the outputs I want. Full celibacy, it's great, but it's also lacking the human side of this experience as well. So somewhere in the middle that is the truth or the right way for yourself. I believe it was in the Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi said, or it comes from Buddhism potentially, maybe both. But he said, like, the truth is in the middle way. And I really like that because it often is. And life, and whether it's media and all these different things, pull us and draw us towards the extremes. You have to be right wing or left wing. You have to be Christian or atheist. You have to be scaling to $100 million monk mode, fully dialed in business, or sitting in the tall grass with your friends. But it's a false binary. It's just a arbitrary wall that they were like, you have to choose A or B, but opt out of the question and just go in the tall grass and build a $100 million business. Like, who says you can't have it all? And to those that are willing to battle for it, there can be people that prove, like the Michael Singer that you referenced, that maybe it can be done.
Agreed.
Well, I think we could go on, and I really appreciate their time and this conversation. It's been extremely impressive. I think I didn't give enough shine at the very beginning, but one of the things that encouraged me to ask you on this podcast was, yes, you're extremely sharp, a ton of business acumen, very, very switched on, but you hold a tremendous amount of space and like command a good amount of presence that I think I articulated to you in our first conversation. I was like kind of pushed back by, and I'm not often I don't know if the intimidated is the right word, but certainly like well met. And so I was really, really impressed with that. And I appreciate you having the willingness to join this platform and then also bring my personal story a little bit full circle as my first trip here in Bali. So I'm extremely grateful for your time, and I look forward to what the future of this relationship looks like. I will direct you now to the 3 closer questions I ask every single guest. Some will be slightly related to what we talked about, some will not. But the first is, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and tell him one thing, what would that be?
Ooh, good question. What age are we talking?
It's up to you. What younger Khoa needs this version and some piece of wisdom?
I think I would have read the spiritual texts a lot earlier. It's in the Bible with the Quran. Look into Buddhism, Taoism. Look into that a lot earlier. Yeah.
I love that. And then secondly, as you can probably tell, I'm a big quote person. I love words. So what is one quote that has always stuck with you or that you try to live by?
So, actually, back to the communication thing. One of the biggest reasons why I went down the route of communication to, fix all of that at the beginning, like we talked about this at the beginning, was there was a quote that my communication mentor, he mentioned at the time, which is that communication is a tide that lifts all boats. I've kind of paraphrased that quote for myself. And the paraphrasation for me is the tide that lifts all boats. And then I use that in everything. I'm like, how can I find, like if I'm making a decision, right? Option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which of these is the tide that will lift all boats? If I attack one of them, which one lifts all of them? That's one. All right, let's say, and then character-wise, all right, I want to be the kind of character or the kind of person or the kind of man who will be the tide that lifts all boats for the people around me. Right.
I love that. And then finally, what do you believe is your unique gift to give the world?
Interesting. I'm unsure. I don't know.
Where did your mind jump to immediately?
Oh, there's a couple of things. It was the distilling difficult things down to make it simpler. That's possibly one. Sharing, like going out and experiencing life on, this side, that side, and then sharing what I learned. That's 2. Or 3 is possibly become an example of the values that I hold. And hopefully people can inject that into themselves. I think it will make the world a lot more better.
Amazing. Well, Khoa, I appreciate your time. Let the people know where they can find you and what you're working on right now.
Appreciate it, yeah. So my Instagram, right, it's just KHOATRN. You can just find me on my Instagram. And then in terms of what I'm working on right now, I am, interestingly enough, looking into like investing and trading and those type of things. More specifically, the reason why is that is the career path I'm going to head down. Eventually, and might as well learn about it, right?
Amazing. All of your links will be in the show notes for anyone who is curious to hear more or reach out to Khoa directly. It will be there. Obviously, you found this podcast on either Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or your respective podcast player, where you can find more of these in the future, as well as previous episodes. You can follow myself at ZDSCHENKEN on Instagram and Twitter. And for those that have made it thus far and stuck with us, thank you. Remember, your time and attention are your most valuable resources, so thank you for spending a little of them with myself and Khoa today. Memento Mori, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Vitruvian Podcast.
Much love.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.